Ya se movió.
Wales offers stunning landscapes that will simply take your breath away, and no beautiful landscape is complete without a castle. It's therefore not surprising to learn that with a total of 600 castles, Wales offers more castles per square mile than anywhere else on the planet. But let's take a look at other interesting destinations.
This video is about home-built linear drives. The first example is from an old printer. It's the drive of the printhead. A brushed DC motor pulls the carriage along the round guide bar using a toothed belt. While the head moves, a transmissive optical sensor scans the fine lines printed on a stripe of plastics. The two sensor outputs are connected to an Arduino Uno, and through an H-bridge the microcontroller can command the motor in either direction using two output pins. The Arduino counts the number of scanned lines and compares the actual value with the set point that is transmitted from a host computer through the USB interface. This type of linear drive is fast. Less than 2 seconds are needed to move the printhead from left to right, which equals a distance of approximately 30 centimeters. The motor consumes around 1 watt of electric power when operated at 5 volts. High speed means low torque. The carriage can be stopped by hand easily. Even with the fine pattern on the plastic stripe, you still can notice the carriage moving for a single step when having a close look. 7000 steps are needed to move the printhead for 30 centimeters, thus 1 step equals 0.04mm. With a linear sensor, the microcontroller can detect movement relative to the plastic stripe. If the carriage is stopped by hand, the motor is kept energized until the mechanism is released and the set point is reached. When deflecting the carriage manually, the microcontroller compensates the movement of the printhead caused by the side load. In doing so, backlash or slip are partially balanced by the control loop. The microcontroller detects movement in relation to the line pattern on the sensor stripe. When removing the tab from the mechanics, the carriage is controlled in such a way that the printhead follows the movement of the plastic stripe. Ensure that the sensor stripe is mounted tightly, which is done by a spring steel plate at this mechanics. Here, the toothed belt is replaced by a simple cord. Even while the cord slips along the motor shaft, the microcontroller still can direct the printhead to the given set point reliably. Spindles are often used to transform rotational movement into linear movement. Here a 6mm threaded rod is used. Whenever the thread is turned by the motor, the carriage moves along the aluminum square tubes guided by ball bearings. The brushed DC motor is from an old printer and the gear ratio of the plastics wheels is 12:1. The pitch of the thread is 1mm per turn. The motor must make 12 turns in order to move the carriage for 1mm, which is a large overall transmission. The speed of the linear drive is approximately 1mm per second, thus it is a rather slow but powerful movement. The sensor disc from the printer mounted at the plastic gear on the threaded rod is scanned by two transmissive optical sensors. Both sensor outputs are connected to the Arduino Uno, which can command the DC motor to spin in either direction through an H-bridge. The working principle of this type of rotary encoders has been treated in a previous video. The fine line pattern on the sensor disc results in 3000 pulses per revolution. With the given pitch of 1mm per turn, the thread transforms one step into a linear movement of 0.3 micrometers, at least in theory. In practice, backlash is usually higher than the academical step width. The microcontroller can't detect the backlash, thus it can't compensate that kind of movement. Another drawback of that fine line pattern is the large number of pulses generated by the optical sensors with each revolution, which limits the rotational speed. Remember the low clock speed of the microcontroller. With 2 transmissive sensors and a toothed sensor disc having 4 teeth, we get 16 steps per revolution. With each step, the carriage moves 0.06mm, a resolution that is sufficient for many applications. We can also use the rotational sensor composed of resistors in the control circuit. Instead of using a second wiper, the washer side of the sensor is pulled to ground through the ball bearings, whose resistance is obviously low enough. Contact bounce is a huge drawback of this type of electromechanical encoder, limiting the maximum revolution speed. What about using an optical computer mouse as shown in a previous video to create another linear sensor? As you can see, it is indeed a practical motion sensor for our control circuit. Only the change in movement along the y-axis is processed by the microcontroller. The motion sensing is done relative to the underlying surface. When moving the sheet of paper by hand, the carriage follows that movement. Even when interrupting the movement by hand, the motor stays energized until the set point is reached. Deviation caused by side load is counterbalanced by the control circuit. I will do more investigations about using an optical mouse as linear sensor in a future video. When connecting a bipolar stepper motor to the threaded rod, the linear drive works even without sensor feedback. The motor is commanded by a Raspberry Pi. Without feedback, the Raspberry Pi can't detect if the set point is reached. When locking the mechanism by hand, the linear drive doesn't reach the designated point. When using a linear drive without feedback loop, the torque generated by the stepper motor must be sufficiently high so that the movement of the mechanism isn't interrupted unforeseen. Finally, I'm using 2 linear drives to build a computer controlled machine. The printhead drive is mounted perpendicularly to the linear drive composed of a DC motor and a threaded rod. A relay with a tiny lever moves a wire up and down, transferring ink from the reservoir to an underlying sheet of paper. The working principle is similar to that of dot matrix printers. With no more than one needle, it is inevitably a monochrome printer, producing large dots with low speed. Nonetheless, that's why this machine is an illustrative way of explaining how printers work, or how bitmap graphics are drawn on a computer screen. Each dot has a diameter of approximately 1mm, thus the resulting resolution is 25 dots per inch. Around 1 hour passed by until the 300x318 pixel graphic, resulting in 11,000 black dots, was transferred to the paper sheet. Read more about this machine and linear drives on the project page. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back.
I was a tech reporter, and I was at Newsweek when basically it went under. And in 2012, and I got laid off, and I was 52 years old. And I looked around, and it wasn't just that my company was going out of business, my business was going out of business. And I always wanted to work at a tech company. I always had this idea of working at a startup. They always seemed to be having so much more fun than we were, you know, the journalists. You know, you'd go visit these guys, and it looked like they're having a blast, right? Because they're all growing, the companies are making money, they're hiring rather than laying off. I had spent the last 10, 20 years in companies where you're always waiting for the next layoff. So I went to work at a place called HubSpot, which makes marketing software. And it was like, had every startup cliche. They're in Boston, so I didn't have to move. They had every startup cliche you can imagine. So we had the dogs in the office, we had nap rooms, we had beanbag chairs, which at age 52, you should not have conference rooms with beanbag chairs, because you can get into the beanbag chair, but you can't get back out. Like, there's no graceful way to get out of a beanbag chair, you know? So you'd see all these people kind of crawling around on all fours after a meeting, which I thought was very undignified. The average age was 26, literally half my age, right? And almost everybody was right out of college. They had these like bros who would they had a push-up club in the lobby at lunchtime, like doing their bro thing, like, do you even lift? And and I have to say, I very quickly realized it was like a blend, it was like a mix of a frat house, a Montessori kindergarten, and a Scientology compound, right? It was like all three things in once, right? And thank you. So, equal parts of each. They had a culture code. They loved culture. They wanted to talk about culture. We're going to make culture overt and explicit, and we're going to create a company that we love, right? And the culture code basically just defined what does it mean to be HubSpotty? How do you belong to the cult, right? Like, how do you fit in? And they had a couple acronyms, HEART and VORP. VORP was value over replacement player, which is comes from baseball, pro baseball. Like, why are we paying you more than what we could pay the average person to do your job, which is a cruel metric. And the other one, in my case, I thought I should have a negative VORP because they were paying me a pretty good salary and I did almost nothing, right? So, and HEART was, you had to be humble, effective, adaptable, remarkable, and transparent, right? And at one point I had to have a review with my boss, who was a guy not in the 40s, say, but two grown men, and we had to sit in this little tiny room, and he had to give me a HEART score, and I got a 2. And I kind of thought, like, how has it happened that two grown men are sitting in a room having a discussion about such obvious, risible bullshit, right? Like to say, you know, like, HEART, what's your HEART score? Like, but it sounded all scientific. Here's your number. We're a data-driven organization. Your HEART is a 2. I'm like, why? It should be a 0, right? I have no HEART, right? They had training when you joined, and they would talk about your superpower. Like, what's your superpower? And they would talk about this literally, and I would burst out laughing. I was a journalist, right? Like, I mean, you know, journalists really don't like this stuff. So, what's your superpower? What is your superpower? And we they had 2 weeks of training. We had to learn how to use the product, but it was really indoctrination, right? And they would tell these kids, do you know how lucky you are to be here? Thousands of people wanted the job that you got. But it's harder to get a job here than to get into Harvard, right? Which is totally not true. But anyway, and so they would feed them all this stuff, and then they would be like, okay, what's your superpower? And then we had to go around and tell something about ourselves that no one knew, that made us special and made us a snowflake, you know? And I'm like, I don't really, you know, have anything, you know? And like one guy was, I play in a heavy metal band on weekends. Like, oh, cool, you know? I was like, well, I'm the only one in this room who's had a colonoscopy, right? And they take a hose. You kids, you won't believe this, but trust me, this is coming for you, right? They take a hose. But they give you pills. You don't remember it, you know, but you know they did it, right? You know, and they're just looking at me like, dude, what is wrong with you? Like nobody laughs, right? Like nobody laughs, right? That was my superpower. I endured the colonoscopy, right? I'm the only one here who takes Lipitor. I have high cholesterol, so you know. And then the main way to succeed was just to be enthusiastic. You didn't have to do anything. You just had to be a team player, like a total team player. You had to be GSD, get shit done. And this is a real chalkboard. HubSpot equals cool. Like somebody at work just stopped on their way to get coffee and just wrote HubSpot equals cool on a chalkboard. Like, I don't know why, right? They had a slogan, 1 + 1 = 3, right? Which you guys all did math. You know that's not true, right? But I mean, so 1 + 1 = 3. And then they would say things like, I like that idea, but I don't think it's 1 + 1 = 3 enough. You know, we're HubSpot. We have to do something a little better. I'm like, what? So, And they had cheers for peers. So constantly people would be cheering for each other because the way to get attention or to move up in the organization was to show that you gave praise to other people. It took me a long time to figure this out. So we would get these praise-gasms, I call them. They were like emails with, someone would say like, oh my God, I just want to say that Ashley last week totally crushed it when she was running a blog all by herself, right? But it would be to everyone, right? Everyone in the whole department would get this email. And then the protocol was to reply to all. You had to reply to all saying, oh God, girl, you go, you know, like, woohoo, Ashley for president. And if you didn't reply to all, like you looked like a curmudgeon, right? And then so your email would fill up with like 100 emails from people all saying the same shit to each other, right? And for a while I would ignore it. Then I thought like, I'm looking like a grumpy old guy. So I joined in and would be like, woohoo. And I'd put like 800 exclamation points, you know? And then someone figured out like, dude, you're being a dick, stop that, right? So so I'm thinking like, this place is nuts, right? This place is really crazy. And then one day, the founder there published an article on LinkedIn. He had a new management breakthrough, which is that he really wants to always be solving for the customer. And so he would bring a teddy bear to all of his management meetings, and they would have to talk to the teddy bear as if it were a customer. That was a way to remind you to always solve for the customer, right? So I'm like, okay, this is officially nuts, right? Like I spent all these years writing about Apple from the outside, envisioning it as this cult compound, and now I'm living in a real cult compound, right? This is even crazier than I ever imagined Apple, even as a fiction writer, right? So I sat desk to desk with this guy who was like my boss, who was like 12, and I was like, dude, hey, dude, that thing with the teddy bear, that's crazy, right? And he's like, well, no. And I'm like, look, no one else is around. You can tell me, like, we know it's nuts, right? And he's like, no, I think it's, it's kind of eccentric, but it's good. I was like, oh my God, right? So like no one will laugh at the teddy bear. That was even worse to me than the teddy bear, was the fact that no one would laugh at it, right? So I called a friend of mine who had left journalism and become a marketing guy, but had done it successfully, unlike me. And I said to him, I told him about the teddy bear, I showed him the article, I was like, is this normal? Like, man, is this what it's like in the corporate world? I didn't know, you know? And he's like, no, dude, this is Jonestown. Like, get out now. Like, run now. Like, you're sort of one step from having to drink Kool-Aid. Like, literally, they're gonna go around, you're gonna do the mass suicide, the white robes, the whole thing, right? So, and this is what, meanwhile, everybody else, look, this is a real picture. And this is how they were every day. It was like being in La La Land. It was like people, like living in a musical. Everybody was really, really happy, right? And I was not, which makes you miserable. It's crazy making, because you're like, maybe something's wrong with me. Because they are all really, really happy. Maybe the world has changed, and now people bring teddy bears to work, and that's cool, and that's normal, right? But as time went on, I realized, I'm going the wrong way. In fact, it wasn't, people weren't happy. When they did studies and they did surveys, they did relentless happiness surveys. They had very high turnover and very low morale. And that puzzled me too, but then I realized there were two cultures. There was a surface culture, which is all that crap. Then there was a real culture, right? And the real culture was that they had this huge sales boiler room, this telemarketing boiler room, where they put me in for a while to punish me for asking for a new job. And it was like really, really loud. And I had to listen to this guy named Noisy Pete all day long, get on the phone and say the same script over and over. Hey, Bob, how's it going down in Orlando? How's the weather down there? Yeah, great. Hey, what's your marketing plan for this year? And they click, hang up. Start again, right? Smile and dial all day. So these kids would get paid very little money, stuck in a room, given a really hard number to hit that they couldn't hit. They would get burned out, and then they'd get churned out. And in the rest of the company, it was the same way, only it was even less rational, because you could get fired for no reason at all. They'd have a little group of people, and one would be made the boss, and she would just fire all the people she didn't like, right? Because they had these untrained managers, these undertrained managers. Nobody got any training at all. So it was just like Lord of the Flies, right? You just take a bunch of kids and put them in a room and let them be crazy with each other, right? One of my favorite stories was, when they fired you, they called it graduation. This is great. This is the great thing. And we get these cheery emails saying, hey, everybody, just want you to know that Derek has graduated. We can't wait to see where he's going with his next big superpower rock star adventure. It's like, dude, you fired that guy, right? And you'd look over and be like, wait a minute, Derek's gone? Like, and then you look and his desk is empty. Everything's, there's like Spinal Tap drummers. Just poof, they go up in a pile of snow, right? Like people, and it would happen all the time. People would get fired all the time. It was like living in Argentina in the 1970s. Just boom, they just disappear, right? So, and then I realized they don't even think this is a problem. They think this is great. The high turnover thing was actually like, they would say, they would explain it by saying, well, we're rock stars and we can only play with other rock stars. So, if you weren't a rock star, you got graduated, right? And this wasn't even unique to them. It came from Netflix. This is from the culture code, but this came from Netflix. We're a team, not a family, right? This idea that, we need to have A players in every position, but it's telemarketing, right? It's customer support. It's not, anyway, it's more like, it's just a way to use a vendetta on people, right? The other thing I started looking around and realizing is they had this huge emphasis on culture fit, which I think has become this terrible euphemism, this really bad euphemism, which really means racism and lack of diversity. And it's a way of sort of turning a negative into a positive. So look around, there's no one over 30, like hardly, except for me and one other guy who wanted to become my friend, and we used to go for lunch together when they had to break up because people would see us paired up, like the two old guys, right? We had to have a man breakup. So, but there were no people of color, like no black people. We went, the first time we had a whole company meeting, I looked, it was 700 people in a room, and it's like all just white kids in their 20s, and like not even a very diverse group of white people. Like Klan rallies have a wider swath of the Caucasian population than we had. We had like one kind of white person. It looked like the kids you see on Cape Cod in the summer. Like Cape Cod just barfed up the whole population, launched them into Cambridge, and they all landed in one building, right? So I started realizing there were really serious problems about this. Like the industry in a way had gone wrong in ways I didn't understand. Reid Hoffman at LinkedIn actually brags about this. So don't think of your job as a career. You're not coming here to work for a long time. You're not going to do what Linus Torvalds does and write an OS for 25 years. No, you're going to work here for a year and a half, and then we're going to graduate you, and you're going to go do something else, right? At Amazon, so I left to write this book, and they hacked my computers and tried to find out what I was writing, and then the FBI got involved. There's a great, great other story that's in the end of the book. But Amazon, you know, you walk out of a conference room, grown people are sitting there crying at their desks, right? And I start thinking, like, I've stumbled into a much bigger story than I realized. And people start writing me. People read my book and start writing me, telling me these horror stories of things like what I experienced at HubSpot wasn't really all that unusual. In fact, it's becoming the norm, right? Jeffrey Pfeffer, who's a professor at Stanford, wrote an essay when my book came out, Why Modern Work Culture Makes People So Miserable, right? Saying it's a return to the work arrangements of 140 years ago, not a new managerial innovation. It's worth, if you're in the gig economy, God forbid you lose your job and now you have to become an Uber driver because they won't even pay you as an employee, right? They may force you to be a contractor. And VCs won't invest in your company if it's a gig economy company if you want to make your employees actual employees, right? Which kind of kills me because Uber has apparently $10 billion in cash sitting in the bank that VCs have given it, but they won't pay their drivers as employees. They won't give them benefits, right? When the drivers sued, Uber spent $100 million to settle the suit to make it go away, which tells you how badly they don't want to make people employees.
Tats. A few years ago, specialists from the Chaotic Moon Studio showed an invention that can significantly change people's lives. The project, known as Tech Tats, is a series of special tattoos that can prevent people from having to undergo medical checkups. The Tech Tats developers suggest tattooing the body once a year. The built-in sensors will collect all medical information about the body and send it to the doctors. If there's a problem, the sensor will recognize it and register it. Another potential application is data storage. These tattoos can be used as credit cards to pay at the supermarkets. Naked Fit. The invention you see on the screen will appeal to people who like walking barefoot. These are unique adhesive soles that can be used on the beach or while hanging out by the pool. They provide optimum protection against sharp objects and reduce the risk of slipping. The advantage is that the person wearing the soles will no longer have to constantly put on and take off their flip-flops, worrying about losing them. Naked Fit adheres firmly to the sole of your foot, even if you're underwater. Meanwhile, the foot remains clean and dry. Naked Fit is heat resistant, so you can walk on hot sand and rocks without worrying too. Sink. Some inventions become popular long after their creation, and this is exactly what happened in this case. This sink was created about 10 years ago, but people noticed it only a couple of months ago. This unique high-tech sink was developed by the Turkish specialists Osman Can Ozkanli and Batu Manoglu. It can be found in the office of the developer and president of Ozpak. The sink has a futuristic look and will be appraised by lovers of unusual interiors. Osmo. The modern world is increasingly robotic, which makes people worry. Will machines completely replace people in the future? The specialists at Skyline Robotics created the invention you see on the screen, and they have a different opinion. They believe machines will only replace people in hazardous occupations, and that's why they designed Osmo. According to the creators, the glass surface of an average skyscraper is about 28,000 square meters. Cleaning such an area using traditional methods takes about 2.5 months. Meanwhile, by using Osmo, 2 operators can do the same job in about a week. It is important to note that the operators control the robot from a safe place. The benefits of this window cleaner include the ability to recognize convex objects. Osmo is aware that the window in front of it is open and adjusts its route to avoid damaging it. Computer vision and sensors also help to recognize people looking out of the window in order to not hurt them accidentally. Magic Leap 1. The technology you see on the screen will allow everyone to experience augmented reality. Just in case, let's clarify the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality. The first one has nothing to do with the real world and immerses the person in a completely new world, while augmented reality transforms the space around us. Magic Leap 1 creates interactive elements in real time. You can organize a medieval battle in the kitchen, or have the Star Wars characters wander around your bedroom. Currently, several manufacturers are developing augmented reality glasses. However, Magic Leap 1 has a more compact and comfortable design than, for example, the HoloLens or the Oculus Rift virtual reality glasses. Magic Leap 1 is a unique device. These glasses are able to remember the location of the floor, walls, ceilings, and other objects in the room. This allows you to interact with the world around you much more easily. In addition, the person can place digital objects in the space easily. For example, this whale jumps out of the floor and not out of nowhere. The glasses are controlled by the voice, the gestures, and position of the head. They're even able to respond to your eye movements. Magic Leap 1 can be used to play games or surf the internet. The device is suitable for virtual meetings with other people, expanding creative possibilities. It can also display a screen with some information in front of the user's eyes. Unfortunately, virtual objects do not cover the entire field of vision of the person, but are limited to a small area in front of the eyes. Still, Magic Leap 1 works in a much larger area than its analogs. This gadget works in conjunction with a small computer. You can attach it to your pocket or hang it on a shoulder strap. Magic Leap 1 can be used by both creative professionals and entrepreneurs. However, the possibilities are almost limitless, and the manufacturer keeps working to improve the product. Scuba. Just a few weeks ago, Uber announced that it was about to launch an underwater taxi in Australia. Many people know that the Great Barrier Reef can be seen from space, but now anyone can see it up close, if you're lucky, of course. Scuba is a 2-seater submarine, which unfortunately will work for a short period of time. The underwater taxi will work from the 27th of May to the 18th of June this year. A trip for 2 people will cost about $3,000. For this price, travelers will be taken by helicopter to the dock, And from there, the submarine will take them in an hour-long trip near the barrier reef at a depth of 30 meters. The transparent glass capsule will allow you to enjoy the panoramic views. It's almost like diving, but more convenient and spectacular. Your visual field is not limited by a mask. There are no bubbles, and you don't hear your breathing all the time. It should be noted that tourists from the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, as well as England and France can win a scuba trip. However, the number of trips is very limited. The developers want to see how popular the service will be. If it is successful, it will become a permanent project, allowing a large number of people to see the Great Barrier Reef with their own eyes. Blue. The last invention we'll show you today was developed by a team of researchers at the University of California, Berkeley. The Blue robot embodies the latest advances in artificial intelligence. In addition, thanks to deep reinforcement learning, the robot can solve complex problems that for a long time could only be solved by humans. The problem with modern robots is that they are expensive and designed around the principle of very high precision and repeated motions. Blue doesn't have these problems. The total cost of the parts is about $3,000. When assembled, the price increases to $5,000. At the same time, Blue is a step forward in the creation of dynamic and responsive robots. Like people, they will use their eyesight and their tactile skills to make decisions. Blue is sensitive to external factors and calculates its own strength every second. The size of the mechanized arms is comparable to the size of a bodybuilder's arms. And just like a person, the robot can tense its arms or relax them. Pay attention to the joints that move in the same way as the shoulders, elbows and wrists of a human. Thus, Blue copies a person's movements with high precision. Its dexterity is enough to prepare a coffee, although this task is still very difficult for the robot. At the moment, Blue lacks some precision and strength. However, artificial intelligence can compensate for this deficiency.
Do you remember yourself 10 years ago? The world around you was very different from now, wasn't it? No wonder. The 21st century is the age of rapid technological progress, and we're advancing at a mind-blowing rate. So, what do you think our world will look like by 2025? It's only a little bit more than 5 years from now, but by various accounts, it's going to be really exciting in 5 years. Let's see. Solar panels will beat fossil fuels in energy output, becoming the largest source of energy on the planet. Researchers from Thomson Reuters are sure this will happen because of new and modernized materials. With those, solar panels will be able to absorb much more sunlight, and even when it's overcast. Augmented and virtual reality will become a thing. Today it's a pretty new and raw technology, but 5 years from now, it will already be something everyone uses in their everyday lives. For example, you'll be able to have a virtual tour around a hotel before booking a room in it. Or how about taking a good look at 3D models of all goods in a store before adding them to your cart? Handy. Speaking of augmentations, people themselves will become enhanced. Microchips embedded into your skin instead of a paper or plastic ID. Bionic limbs having all the functions real arms and legs possess. Implants improving the work of internal organs, you name it. By 2025, all this and more will become available to the masses, and from then on, it'll only get cheaper and more popular. The problem of traffic jams will either be solved altogether or very close to it. With the growing demand for driverless cars and even flying cars, I can't wait. The human factor will decrease dramatically. And since it's the main reason why traffic congestion even exists, big cities will finally enjoy relatively free roads and we'll all be able to get things done on time. Can't wait for that. By the way, gasoline fuel will become a fading memory by 2025. Electric and hydrogen-powered vehicles will push gas-powered ones further and further out of the market. Also, solar-powered cars will probably emerge, gradually replacing all the rest. Just imagine a car that only requires sunlight and some time to charge before you can go wherever you please. No more running out of fuel in the middle of nowhere. The Internet of Things, or IoT, will be omnipresent. Smart homes, smart offices, whole smart buildings, literally everything will be connected with everything else, separated only by closed internal networks. Living alone yet coming home from work with a hot dinner and a clean house will become a reality. Everything will be done automatically, following just a few flicks of your finger over the smartphone or tablet screen. The Internet will become truly global. Today, only 3 billion people in the world have constant access to the web, while the other 5 billion have either limited access or none at all. Several large companies like Google, Facebook, and SpaceX are already working together on a project that will bring the Internet to everyone on the planet at speeds over 1 megabit per second. By 2025, it will surely be implemented. Artificial intelligence will make a huge leap forward. In 5 years' time, the AI will not only be able to answer simple questions and follow your commands, but it will also become deeper and more inquisitive itself. It'll probably even be able to talk to you. Not like Siri does today, but rather like Tony Stark's Jarvis. In short, it will become everyone's ultimate helper. Medicine won't stay where it is either. Even now, more and more advancements are made in this crucial field, and in 5 years, doctors will find solutions to the most important issues we're currently facing. These include a cure for cancer and AIDS, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and many other conditions that have plagued humans for a long time already. Of course, it's not as easy as it sounds, and it won't be cheap at first, but the main thing is that answers will be found, and the rest is a matter of time. Human genome will most probably be cracked, and only ethical issues will remain before genetic modifications of people become available. With those, we'll be able to get rid of pretty scary genetic conditions in children even before they're born. Scientists all over the world discuss this possibility even today. So, by 2025, the question should have a definite answer. Plastic will finally become a thing of the past. The same Thomson Reuters report I told you about earlier says that by 2025, biodegradable materials based on cellulose will replace plastic packaging for all purposes. No more littering the soil and the oceans. We'll be making a huge step towards a greener planet. And the new material will feel like plastic, by the way, so you won't even notice the difference. A little bit of sci-fi for you. Teleportation and time travel won't be a myth any longer. Scientists have recently discovered that quantum teleportation is possible, while others made an experiment where particles return to their previous state, making it seem like time traveling for them. The researchers stress that quantum experiments can't prove that these things can actually be repeated in the material world. And of course, we won't be able to go to the past or teleport around the world in 5 years' time. But the concept itself will become more real either way. With genetic modification becoming commonplace, modified crops will be grown indoors. Changes to the plant's DNA will make them more resilient and less prone to failure, while at the same time increasing the yield. The times when GMOs were up for debate will have long since gone, and everyone will be able to literally taste the progress. Robots will take over the most menial jobs on the market, making humans turn their attention to more intellectual tasks and opening new opportunities for avid learners. Everything that can be done by robots will not require human assistance any longer. However, in some spheres, these robotic workers won't be completely autonomous. They will have to be manipulated by people either directly or by programming them to do the required stuff. That will open up new jobs, so no need to fear that robots will take away from us and add to the unemployment rate. Speaking of learning, acquiring new skills will be much easier in 5 years than today. With the development of AR and VR, of which I told you earlier on, even the most practical skills will stop needing your actual presence in the room with your teacher. Want to learn how to drive a car? Here's a simulator right in the comfort of your home. Perhaps such a method of learning won't be too widespread yet, but it will definitely start taking over the minds of people and get more and more popular with every passing year. Machine learning will also make large progress. Things like near-perfect electronic translators, navigation systems that adapt to your driving style, and other gadgets and software will make our everyday lives much easier. We'll be able to communicate with anyone we want almost without the language barrier and do our routine stuff quickly and without any discomfort. And it's all thanks to clever machines that teach themselves off their surroundings and the decisions taken, either by humans or around them, or by the machine itself. 5G mobile internet connection will be a common thing in most technologically advanced countries and cities. With 4G, it takes up to an hour to download a movie from the web. 5G takes it to a whole new level, downloading the same movie in just a few seconds. The connection speed of this network is simply astounding, and it allows all kinds of things to be done, from real-time broadcasting of sports events like it was done during the Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang in 2018, to long-distance manipulation of robot surgeons by actual doctors. Blockchain will become the preferred method of transferring money and valuable assets between people and organizations. You must have heard about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Those are based on the blockchain technology. In short, it allows you to get rid of the middleman while transferring your money, making the operation secure and direct. For example, when you make a transfer from card to card, your bank plays the role of that middleman. It tracks all your transactions and can block your account if you do something it thinks is suspicious. With blockchain, nobody but you knows of your operations, which makes it pretty awesome. You know your money is always in your hands, until you spend it. And finally, entertainment will become even more diverse with growth and popularity of space tourism. Right now, entrepreneurs like Richard Branson and Elon Musk are only getting ready to launch their first space tours, and they'll only be affordable for the wealthiest. But by 2025, the cost of it will slowly start to decrease as the whole process will become more easily performed. I'm not saying we'll all be able to see the stars firsthand. It'll still be very expensive, but it will be a beginning. And who knows? Maybe in another decade, we'll be riding rockets into orbit like we fly in airplanes today.